Hi, this is an ordinary voice of spiritual ventriloquism. You are listening to the dummy himself. Well, just getting ready for the Passover this evening, the Jewish Passover. Anyway, whatever. So, what I would like to speak on tonight, because this is just amazing, because I'm talking about restore and protect oil and oil changes and how the engineering went out to come to the conclusion to where they ran these cars like 500,000 miles, and just all of a sudden, right in the middle of the blue, this thought drops into my head. And I tell you what, I've never heard anybody even touch on this subject before, but I've got a question for you. Can a vegetarian keep the Passover? Since it's Passover, it's something to discuss. You know, a lot of things that were done in the late Bronze Age don't necessarily have full application today in this, time that we're living in. Not saying not to keep the Torah, certainly not telling you to not keep the Passover, certainly not telling you to not observe the feast. I think you should engender and endeavor to do those things, because it is through those things that you understand the plan and the work of Yah more completely. Okay? And that is, a lot of Christians, they will have, they have Jesus, They don't really understand what led up to the Messiah. They only say, well, sin, everybody's condemned by sin under the law and blah, 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 right? That's pretty much the gist of it. But this is a good question. If we are to keep the law today perfectly, because there's some people that are going to be observing Passover tonight that are not going to eat lamb, and they're Hebrew Israelites. They're going to be having just what they call the Lord's Supper in the Torah version, and they're going to basically have the unleavened bread and the wine. Okay, wine wasn't even an item in the first Passover. That got incorporated later, but few will even try to do their research to see that the command was to eat lamb and bitter herbs. And that's the command that's in the Torah. But, and pretty much when the Passover began to be observed after they came into the land, that lamb was, or a goat, either one, was legitimate in Yah's eyes. Could be a lamb or a goat of less than a year, and you could have either one. So, but yet there are those today that insist that the only way you can observe the Passover, the only way you can observe what led up to the atonement of the Messiah, is you have to eat lamb. Okay, and my question is, can a vegetarian be saved? Because if our salvation is due to the complete obedience and submission of the Torah in every respect that it was written 4,000 years ago or 3,500 years ago or whatever it was, that we have to keep it in a foreign land, amongst a foreign people, being foreign ourselves, only grafted into the covenant through the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach. We have a conundrum here, okay? And that is, a vegetarian doesn't eat meat, a vegan doesn't eat meat. Can a vegan or a vegetarian be saved? They're not observing the Torah to the letter, or at least our version of the Torah to the letter. A lot of that going on. So this is a video that, I actually want to express the unity in the body of the Messiah. And Paul, or Shaul, however you prefer it, spoke very explicitly in Romans 14:2 and says that there are those who are strong and they eat meat. Um, there are those who are only eat herbs. King James kind of classifies them as strong or weak. I think that that's kind of a stretch. But the bottom line is that there was a variance of opinion as to the difference between vegetarianism, which probably was well in practice about that time. People mainly ate what they had, what they could obtain. Okay? Um, and vegetarian diets can be quite nutritious if you do them properly, but you will vegan diets, but you can suffer lack of nutrition in certain ways, like certain amino acid profiles are difficult to obtain without that. Hang on just a second. Preparing my somewhat bitter herbs. Somewhat bitter herbs. No Seder here tonight, but I would be more than happy and joyous to observe one with those who do. Maybe I'll get that opportunity again. Hallelujah. Well, anyway, Paul said that we should not judge our brother who's weak because he's a vegetarian or a vegan, if that's the case. And then the one who eats herbs shouldn't judge the one who is eating meat. Okay, so you have a conundrum. If 3,500 years ago or so, you had to eat lamb or a goat to observe the Passover meal. Okay, and then later on now. There's variations of either not eating lamb, even in some sects of Torah keeping people, there's the Passover chicken. I know they're condemned. They're damned. I've never heard this before. I've never heard anybody even touch on this subject before, ever. Zero. And why Yah would allow that thought to come into my head, because there have been plenty of thoughts that have come into my head, and they were of varying questionable sources. But what is Paul trying to say here? He's speaking to the unity of the body. He's bringing people along. Now, we know in that day there was a lot of questions about eating meat. People weren't sure whether or not it had been ritually slaughtered properly when it was hanging in the meat market, or whether or not certain other qualities. Maybe the meat market. It was in the meat market, especially around the time of slayings for the observances, because there was some defect, and that would be the difference between meat that was set apart or halal for temple use, for priest use, or whatever, where it couldn't have a mole or whatever, a tumor, where once that or a cyst or something like that. So people had to run around their head. And Paul started talking about, when you go to the market, if you're sure it's a clean animal, don't have any questions arising in your hearts concerning, the actual status of this animal, because you should just go ahead and eat it and eat it in faith. Of course, that's if it's a clean animal. I still agree with the Torah that pig, hog is not an animal that was meant for consumption by people. It's a garbage disposal, like buzzards and hawks and ravens and eagles and all the unclean birds who eat carrion, who do clean up the highways and byways, and they serve a very good purpose for doing that. But what I'm trying to push here and what I'm trying to bring forward here is that either Yah is doing something completely different, because here Paul, who is the spokesman of Yah, is writing to this subject right here. Can a vegetarian or a vegan keep the Passover? I say he can. Okay? I say that a lot of the things in their details and their carrying out in this time are, what do you say, non sequitur. Okay? The points are quite moot, because what happens is that we are trying to cut and paste cultures, cut and paste customs, cut and paste genetics. People who were given the Torah were required to obey in that time. And probably at that time, everybody ate meat. That was probably a normal source of your protein: oxes, lambs, goats, deer, antelope, ibex, right on down the line. We're not going to get into why Jonathan dipped his hand into a dead lion's carcass to taste honey, because whatever touches that which is unclean is unclean, right? But it takes thought and introspection. It takes a lot of other dynamics that most drive-through Bible believers don't normally have the time, and sad to say, in some cases, not even the mental capacity to go there. Okay, well, I go there because I'm not a punk. I go there because I don't think Yah's going to fall off his throne, or I'm going to throw him off his throne because I don't necessarily line up to his perfect will at any given moment. But I will speak. I will speak what I know. And so my answer is yes, a vegan can keep the Passover. A vegetarian can keep the Passover, because that though the observance, or let's rather say the memorial, is still intact, the details as to how to go about it, not so much. And that's what people yell and fight and argue and cut each other off over, and cast out, surrages or carriages against people, because that is what people do. Okay? Tit for tat. Hi. How about you? I've said for many times that you cannot cut and paste every detail of what the Torah requires into this age that we're living in. You can't even come up with half of your doctrines correctly by, well, that's what it says back here, and that was the earliest account of it. Yah is doing a new thing. He really, truly is. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful that I can, when I'm in Rome, I can do as the Romans do. When I am amongst fellow believers who observe things differently than I observe today, I thank Yah that I can do that too. Okay? I can do that too. I have the power to do that. What I cannot do is I can't sit down and eat any meal, a common meal or a sacred meal, with fornicators and abusers of mankind. That I won't do. I won't defile myself. I'd rather not keep the Passover or even think about it at all than to do that. There's some places I won't go. I'll be like Yah. Oh, that I might go into the wilderness amongst a wayfaring people, and there I would find rest. Think about that. Maybe it's tofu images of sheep, Cast them on the altar, right? Anyway, we're gonna cut this off, and we're gonna observe or memorialize the event as we always do, or maybe as we've never done before tonight. Shalom.